Good morning. My name's Erica Perrell, and I'm the Communications Manager with APEC. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. I hope you are happy to be here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging while we're gathering virtually this morning, we're all on lands which are the traditional and unceded territory of various First Nation. APEC has published a number of reports on Indigenous communities and businesses in the Atlantic region. We currently have another project underway looking at how we can best position Indigenous communities and businesses for long-term growth as we continue to recover from the pandemic. The various reports from this project will be released in 2022, so just a few months away. You can find all of our Indigenous focused research on our website. Again, thank you for joining us. APEC has completed extensive research on the topic of clean economic growth. As you likely know, we've recently released 2 research reports and a business guide on behalf of EcoNext. All of those reports in the business guide are available in both English and French. The first report was Atlantic Canada's clean technology sector. And this report was actually an update to our 2018 groundbreaking research study and paper, Growing Atlantic Canada's Clean Technology Firms. It takes the pulse of Atlantic Canadian firms that are developing and providing clean technologies. The second report, Accelerating Clean Technology Adoption in Atlantic Canada, provides insights on the benefits of clean technology adoption, some of the barriers to adoption, how they can be overcome, and how we can ultimately accelerate clean tech adoption. Our final publication, probably the most valuable, is our guide for businesses on how to make your firm more sustainable. And this will really be the focus of today's webinar. All of these reports are available on Clean Growth Research, not just these reports, but the previous research we've done as well are available on our website. I will note as well, as you're listening to our session this morning, if you think of any questions at any point in time, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them during the Q&A portion of the session. I also, disclaimer, the presentation will be available online as well as a recording of the session. So both the presentation as well as the recording, I promise to have them up by tomorrow morning. In all likelihood, they'll be up later this afternoon, but I promise by tomorrow morning for sure. And while you're on our website checking out the presentations or the recording, make sure that you sign up to receive email updates. You can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. This is sort of the easiest way for you to stay up to date with the research that we're doing, the events that we're hosting, and other opportunities to sort of engage with us. Finally, I'd like to thank EcoNext for partnering with us to bring this session to you today. And I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of EcoNext, Kieran Hanley, who will say a few words and introduce today's moderator. Welcome, Kieran.
Thank you, Erica, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm the Executive Director of EcoNext. Some of you may know us by our previous name, the Newfoundland and Labrador Environmental Industry Association, or NEIA. We're a group of businesses that work towards accelerating clean growth in our province. Our members work in virtually every sector of importance to our provincial economy. And as an organization, we are very, very active in supporting research, development, and adoption of clean technology, and oftentimes on a regional basis. So for that reason, we are very, very happy to be partnered on this session this morning. EcoNext, in collaboration with APEC and with support from the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, engaged in research in 2021 with the objective to help Atlantic Canadian businesses understand the role that clean tech adoption can play in ensuring their sustainability and the competitiveness of their business. We have a great lineup of presenters for you to help communicate, discuss, and explore those findings. And introducing that panel will be the job of our moderator for today's session. David Chorandy is the President and CEO of the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council. David has conducted and led research on a wide variety of topics during his more than 20 years at APEC. He now leads the organization to bring its independent insights and ideas to business, policymakers, and others to help us all create a healthy, inclusive, and sustainable economy in Atlantic Canada. So thank you all again. And David, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Kieran, for that introduction and the work that you're doing with your team at EcoNext. And also, I noticed in the news this morning that you're also now chairing an advisory panel to help advise the province on how to get net zero. So, looking forward to see what comes out of that. So, thank you and welcome everyone for joining us today. This is an important topic. As part of our mission, as Kieran just referenced, there is to ensure that we have a sustainable economy, not just from an environmental point of view, but from a fiscal point of view, from a business competitiveness point of view. And so it's really critical that we speak about this topic today that's really grown in importance. As Erica mentioned, we've done work on this in the past, but now that the environment is shifting, it's not just about a policy agenda to get to net zero or to introduce carbon pricing. This is becoming a business imperative. We've got investors looking to invest in certain types of firms and not in others. We have people in their supply chain looking to ensure that their supply chain is moving towards more environmentally friendly standards. We have employees looking to work for companies or choosing not to work for some companies if they don't feel they're really taking the sustainability agenda seriously. So from whatever driver, it's really important that Atlantic businesses understand what's happening. And as Fred will share in a few minutes, we are currently kind of lagging behind the rest of the country in terms of thinking about and adopting clean technology. And this is really a key issue here. We can't afford to be lagging behind our competitors because it is going to have some business impact. So there's lots of issues to talk about today, and we really want to look at the research, some of the data, some of the interviews and the work that we've been doing from various surveys and what that says. We're then going to talk to a couple of businesses and have them present at different scales about what they have been doing, how that's going to impact their business, what's motivated them, how that clean technology adoption has helped their business. And then finally, we're going to turn to ACOA and talk about what's the role of government here. How can governments help support businesses as we move forward? So that's the plan for the morning. As Erica said, anytime during the presentations of our four panelists, you can put your questions in the chat, and we will try to address as many of those as possible at the end of the session. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Fred Bergman. He is our Senior Policy Analyst at APEC. Fred has been leading our work on Indigenous communities and businesses. He's leading the current project that Erica mentioned, and he's also been the lead researcher for the work and the report that Erica mentioned on clean technology firms and clean technology adoption. So Fred, as you've looked at the research, as you looked at data from different surveys, as you've talked to firms in the region, what are some of the key findings that you can tell us about how we kind of accelerate clean technology adoption in Atlantic Canada?
Well, thanks, David, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's APEC webinar presentation on clean technology adoption in Atlantic Canada. So I'd like to discuss 5 things today. What is clean technology? Why adopt clean technology? What are the business benefits of clean technology? Are Atlantic firms adopting clean technology? And what are some of the barriers to adoption of clean technology? So what is clean technology adoption? Well, adoption of clean technology includes anything that reduces negative environmental impacts. This can include things like buying goods that are less energy or resource intensive. For example, Cabot Shores and Cape Breton invested in solar panels to generate electricity for the grid, offsetting a large amount of their own energy consumption. They also worked to boost their overall energy efficiency with improved insulation in their buildings, and they replaced electric heat with a centralized wood boiler and underground pipes. Another reason is to find better ways to manage natural resources. For instance, Atlantic Beef Products and PEI was recognized as a certified sustainable beef processing operation after successfully passing an audit by Where Food Comes From. Another reason is to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. J.D. Irving Limited invested in its Lake Utopia paper mill to reduce its GHG emissions by about 1/4, which our next speaker will discuss. And finally, it helps find other ways to reduce your environmental footprint. For instance, Clearwater Seafoods implemented geographic information system software on its offshore lobster vessel to help them more effectively target where to fish. This improved ship routing, reduced fossil fuel use, and allowed them to catch their quota with half as many traps. Global purchases of clean technologies are forecast to exceed $2.5 trillion by next year. So why adopt clean technology? Well, One reason is to meet regulatory obligations. For example, municipalities have regulations on recycling. The Canadian government has requirements on vehicle emissions, and there's a plan to ban single-use plastics in 2022. Another reason is it just makes good business sense. For example, you may be able to lower your operating costs by eliminating waste or reducing your energy consumption. This can help cut greenhouse gas emissions and the amount of carbon tax that your firm may have to pay. Demonstrating that your business is more sustainable than your competitors can give you a competitive advantage in the marketplace. For instance, McCain Foods and Western Aerospace drone technology were used to examine field conditions and improve crop development and minimize the use of pesticides and herbicides. Another benefit is or reason is to remain competitive in the supply chain. Environmental, sustainable, and governance reporting is becoming more popular. You may need to meet sustainability requirements to become a qualified supplier to other firms or governments. Another reason is to satisfy the expectations of investors, customers, and employees. Investors are paying more attention to sustainability of their investments. Customers want to make green purchases. Prospective employees may not want to work for companies that don't seem to be sincere or care about the environment. In addition, you may want to do this to align with government policies and priorities. For example, New Brunswick's Climate Change Action Plan promotes energy efficiency, with over 1,000 businesses taking advantage of energy efficiency programs since 2017. Finally, it's just to be a good corporate citizen. Everyone needs to do their part to look after the environment, whether they are required to do so or not. Sustainability is an important part of corporate social responsibility. So what are the business benefits of clean technology adoption? Well, one benefit is to lower business costs due to better energy efficiency and lower fuel consumption. I already talked about how Clearwater Seafoods implemented GIS software to improve ship routing, reduce the number of lobster traps it uses, as well as reduce fossil fuel use. Another benefit is to increase revenues as you meet the sustainability requirements to sell to other businesses or governments. For instance, Cook Aquaculture adopted clean technology to remove sea lice without any harm to the fish. It has reduced the need for costly therapeutics and improved productivity and avoided the loss of sales due to the presence of sea lice. Another benefit is to improve competitiveness and business performance. For instance, Russell Industries in New Brunswick acquired tank cleaning equipment that decreases environmental impacts while also improving safety and reducing use of manual labor. And then a final benefit is to help your business become an environmental leader, since clean technology adoption helps support environmental sustainability and governance reporting. For example, companies such as J.D. Irving Limited, McCain Foods, Scotiabank, Emera, and Suncor Energy are all providing environmental sustainability and governance reporting. Small firms like Succeed in Newfoundland and Labrador and Rise in New Brunswick are what's called certified B corporations, which are certified as being sustainable and inclusive businesses. So are Atlantic businesses adopting clean technology enough? Well, some businesses have adopted clean technology in the past. So, for example, about 7% of Atlantic businesses have adopted clean technology versus 9% nationally as of 2019. The select industries in the chart on the right are adopting clean technology that is at a rate equal to or greater than the all industry average of 7% for the Atlantic region. Atlantic Canada's clean technology adoption is concentrated in the goods sector, as shown in the chart on the right, including utilities, primary industries, and mining, oil, and gas. So why are firms reluctant to invest in clean technology? What are some of the barriers or obstacles or challenges they're facing? Well, in 2018, the main obstacles to spending on environmental protection were insufficient return on investment, lack of information, and access to financing. To address lack of information, businesses or organizations can attend trade shows, ask your industry association, seek help, get references, or ask for a demo of clean technology. Lack of skills, challenges integrating new technologies, and regulatory issues were also cited in 2018. In APEC interviews with adopters, key concerns were high cost of insufficient return on investment. Well, proven clean technologies have a good return on investment, and interest rates are low. So it's a good time to invest in clean technology adoption. Another thing you could do is examine all the costs and benefits or what your competitors are doing. You could also discuss with financing partners and explore government support programs. If the investment you're thinking of making only makes sense if carbon prices are higher or environmental regulations are tighter, you could consider how these policies may change in the future. Another barrier that we found from our interviews was access to capital. What are some solutions there? Well, you could ask your industry or business association for help in finding other funders. You could share your clean technology adoption business plan with other potential funders. You could also see if there are government funding programs available. Lynn Adams from ACOA will discuss this in more detail later this morning. And then the final barrier that we saw on a continual basis was lack of staff. So what are some solutions there? Well, you could research training options through colleges, universities, or your technology supplier. You could also use recruitment agencies or your regular hiring process to advertise positions. And finally, you could hire a consultant or expert on a short-term contract to fill some of your labor supply gaps. Our business guide provides how you can respond to common concerns and includes links to federal and provincial funding programs and other resources to help you, as do our 2 companion reports. We have also released a more detailed research report on the state of clean technology adoption in this region. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Fred, for that comprehensive but also concise overview. And I think, one of the things that's a key takeaway for me when I look at our research is that clean technology adoption can be done in any business. It can cover any business sector, industry. It can cover larger businesses and smaller businesses. It can include something simple like adopting very established technologies like solar panels or shifting the type of fuel use for electric vehicles. And it can also include adopting kind of more cutting edge and kind of leading new technologies. So to look at then how this then plays out in terms of the business community, our next speaker is Dion Hanrahan. He's the Vice President with Industrial Business Development with JD Irving. JD Irving, again, a very large company with lots of operations. And so we've asked Dion if you could just take 2 or 3 examples to illustrate kind of what they've done in terms of clean technology adoption. So Dion, over to you. And thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning, David, and thank you for the introduction. And thanks for the opportunity to speak about some of the green investments we've made here at JDI over the last number of years. Now, many of you may be familiar with JDI, but for those of you who aren't, I'll just give you a brief introduction. We're a privately held group of companies headquartered in St. John, New Brunswick, currently employing over 18,000 employees. And we operate across a very broad range of businesses, generally grouped into 8 operating divisions. So we have agriculture, construction and equipment, consumer products, food, retail and distribution, shipbuilding and industrial fabrication, transportation and logistics, and finally forestry and forestry products, which is probably what we're most well known for. It's this last division I want to focus on this morning, specifically our pulp and paper operations that are located in southern New Brunswick. So our operations for pulp and paper consist of 4 mills. We have a kraft mill and tissue mill in West St. John, supercalendar paper mill in East St. John, and a corrugating medium mill in St. George, New Brunswick. While they all make different products, they do share some very common traits. They're all energy intensive and all very export dependent. In fact, the vast majority of our forest products are exported over 80% generally, and some of our businesses like Irving Paper export over 90%. So competitiveness in terms of operating costs and manufacturing costs to compete globally are extremely important to us, and a big consideration when we look at sustainability investments. So before we dive into the 2 specific examples I'm going to use today, I thought a long-term view of our emissions performance would probably be helpful. The graph you see in front of you outlines our greenhouse gas emissions intensity from the 4 pulp and paper mills I mentioned over the last 30 years. As you can see, we've been able to reduce our emissions intensity by approximately 80% over that time frame. And at the same time, our combined output of all 4 of those mills has increased by 60%. Also, you'll notice that over to the right, I've included some of the GHG targets that have been set by the provincial and federal government for 2030. You can see that they both anchor on the year 2005, and they're both approximately 45 to 47%. I'm happy to say that if we measure our performance since 2005 through to 2020, we've been able to reduce our emissions by 56%, which obviously exceeds those targets and just happened to occur about 10 years early. So we're quite proud of that. The two green technologies I'd like to talk about today had a big part to play in that. And while they're mature and not necessarily cutting edge, they certainly have played a big role in achieving that reduction. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the introduction, Lake Utopia Paper is our corrugating medium and liner mill in St. George. It's been in operation since 1972, produces about 185,000 tons of finished product per year. And for those who don't know what corrugating medium is, it's basically the wavy part between the outside and inside pieces of the corrugated box. The steam required for the operations at Lake Utopia was traditionally generated in 3 boilers, and those boilers were all fired by fossil fuels. It was a combination of natural gas, number 6 fuel oil, and some biogas that was produced at the facility. So the first big investment I wanted to focus on was one that we did in 2011, and that was the installation of a biomass boiler. And that was undertaken for 2 reasons, quite frankly. One of them was around the environmental performance. We did want to reduce the GHG emissions at the site. And then also, at the same time, we were exposed to volatile fossil fuel pricing, and we saw biomass as an opportunity to go ahead and give us a longer-term stable fuel product that wasn't basically exposed to volatile worldwide pricing. The biomass it basically just came from local sources around the plant. And if anyone remembers what polar vortex did in 2013, 2014, we were happy not to be exposed to that when natural gas prices escalated by over 10 times their regular price. So the boiler had an immediate impact on our operations. It can satisfy typically about 65 to 70% of our steam demand, and it allowed us to retire 2 out of the 3 fossil fuel boilers right away. So it had a dramatic impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. As a matter of fact, it was installed with the idea that in the future, with some incremental investment, we'd be able to expand that to potentially produce some renewable electricity from biomass as well. The second investment that I wanted to talk about was one that was a little bit more recent. It occurred in 2018, and that's with the installation of a new effluent treatment plant at Lake Utopia. And the investment was undertaken as part of the modernization of the facility. The prior anaerobic digesters at the facility were in operation since 1985. They were becoming a little unreliable. And we saw it as an opportunity to go ahead and increase our ability to treat as well as capture some additional biogas from our operation. So you can see from the slide, the largest component of that is the white covered area on the lower right picture that you're going to see. That's a 39 million gallon low rate anaerobic digester. And the digester is completely covered by a geomembrane liner. And the beauty of the liner is it allows us to capture virtually 100% of any of the off gas coming from the digester itself. And it immediately resulted in a 23% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. And our biogas production has definitely increased by 50% or more from the prior system. And the beauty of that system is twofold, really. It allows us to displace natural gas immediately in terms of combusting biogas as opposed to fossil fuel. But then it also reduced our fugitive emissions. And as anyone who's known about fugitive emissions and methane and followed any of the dialogue around oil and gas, any fugitive emissions that aren't combusted have a much more significant warming potential than CO2. So the ability to capture that biogas instead of exposing it to the atmosphere also had a significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So overall, if I look at 2012 when those investments came online, it's been able to reduce our GHG emissions at the lake by approximately 70%, which is a significant improvement. I also manage the natural gas contracts for the organization, and I've seen it in the natural gas consumption that actually happened in the lake. It's dropped dramatically, and these 2 investments have played a large part in that. Next slide, please. On the final slide, I just wanted to highlight some additional investments across the organization. And I know it's hard to narrow them down because we've done quite a few of them, but I just wanted to highlight things around biomass and biogas that are happening elsewhere as well. So in New Annan, in PEI, Cavendish was one of the first to actually install a biogas plant, started in 2009. And that was really to capture any of the biogas that came from the anaerobic digestion of potato waste. That was able to reduce their GHG emissions by over 30%. And that had a dramatic impact on the attributed emissions for the facility too, because the biogas actually replaced compressed natural gas that was being trucked from New Brunswick. We had actually put in a CNG facility to serve New Annan to get off the heavier fuel oil years before that. The other one that you'll see here is Grand River Pellets. So Grand River Pellets began operation in 2019 in Grand Falls, New Brunswick. Current operation produces over 100,000 tons of wood pellets, and those are currently being exported to the UK and to Western Europe, predominantly for use in displacing coal for electricity generation. So a lot of the coal plants in Europe now have mandates to go ahead and coal-fire pellets to reduce the carbon intensity, and that's where the output for that product goes right now. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight some of the other biomass-related investments. So there's been a big biomass investment across the organization, in sawmills in particular, to reduce a lot of the oil and other fuels, fossil fuels that would have been consumed there. And in addition to the biomass boilers that we put in place at our sawmills, we've also gone ahead and installed back pressure turbines in a number of those facilities. So 3 of them in particular, Grand Lake Timber and Chipman is the most recent, but then also our 2 sawmills in Maine, Ashland and Dixfield, have back pressure turbines as well. So combined, they actually generate additional renewable energy in excess of 2.5 megawatts installed capacity, a little bit less than that on an annual production basis. But what it does allow us to do is just get a little bit more benefit from the biomass boiler that we're operating, and gives us a little bit more renewable energy to offset what we would normally otherwise purchase from the grid. So it's just an example of some more of that continuous improvement and just adding on to the initial investment that you make in biomass and in renewable and sustainable technology. So in closing, you'll notice that there's a number of scales of investments across the organization. And I didn't even touch on transportation and logistics. We've done plenty in that area as well. But the scale doesn't necessarily have to be a multi-million-dollar scale. We've made much smaller investments that have had incremental impacts, but they all add up to achieving that sustainability and that profile that we showed on the first slide around GHG emissions. And it's a culture of continuous improvement here at JDI to continue to look for better ways to reduce our emissions, our environmental footprint, and maintain sustainability. And these are just some examples of that. So thank you, David, for the opportunity to speak about it.
Well, thank you very much, Dion. And again, I appreciate you kind of sharing those examples. I know you don't have time to discuss everything, but again, just illustrating that this can be done at lots of different scales, from big multi-million-dollar types of investments to kind of smaller initiatives. So again, appreciate that. And also just let everyone know, Erica did post the link to the Clean Growth website. That's where you'll find all our research reports, including the adoption report and the business guide that Fred talked about. And then you can find some more of those examples that he referred to in his presentation. So now we're going to go from kind of the big diverse conglomerate to a much smaller scale of operation. And Mark Sherman is the president of Atlantic Grown Organics. They use their greenhouses in PEI to grow organic tomatoes, cucumbers, and other vegetables year-round from their family farm. So he's going to talk about how they've changed some of their energy supply to improve their environmental sustainability. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and thanks certainly for the opportunity to take part in this panel. So as David mentioned, we are we're not the scale of JDI, but we are the largest organic greenhouse operation in Atlantic Canada. We have about 4 acres under cover, and I guess my sales pitch is that we're the largest greenhouse in Atlantic Canada, supplying to all your local chain retailers. So you can find our products in any one of those areas. So we are a generational business, a generational farm operation. In past generations, we were livestock. When I came home from school, I went into the greenhouse business and expanded it fairly aggressively over the last few years as market conditions allowed. And I guess through the generations, our business has been fairly focused on renewables as well. Back in the 80s, we burnt straw. We changed to wood chips in the early 90s, and then we've done some more renovations or additions to further, I guess, supplement that energy production capability as we've grown our greenhouses. Next slide, please. So, like I said, I am a greenhouse operation, so we grow things like large tomatoes, small tomatoes, it's all set up in a very traditional fashion, but we are certified organic as well. So just to give a little bit of a sense of what the operation is like, most people don't understand what a greenhouse operation does, but of course it is a fairly intensive energy user. We're harvesting product right through the winter. So we've got plants in there growing today while it's snowy and pretty nasty outside here this morning, actually. Next slide. So just keep rolling through them there, I guess. So cucumbers, and then just to give you an idea of where we're at. Peppers. And we do then have a bunch of lettuce and things sort of for the local market. So then just pause there for a moment, please. So then we also do, because we are a year-round greenhouse operation, we also do have a fair investment in lighting as well. In order to grow things in Canada throughout the winter, we do need to invest in supplemental lighting. It's not the same as certainly growing fully indoors, but the lighting this time of year can double the speed of what you would normally harvest on. You just couldn't run right through the winter without supplemental lighting. So we are we're the first greenhouse in Atlantic Canada to invest significantly in supplemental lighting. And the previous slide, I think, showed some of the yellower high pressure sodium lights that we originally started with back in about 2014. But now we're switching to a little higher efficiency LED lights, so we can get about half the energy consumption per unit area, and that's helped us as well. LEDs in the greenhouse industry are very new, I guess, and we're not quite sure how to grow effectively with them yet. But there's been a lot of research done over the recent years, and we're getting those systems, I guess, a little more refined as the years go on. But and then as far as our investment in clean energy outside of the LED lights, like I mentioned previously, we do also use biomass energy. So this is the biomass system that we installed in 2019. So it's about a 2.5 megawatt system from Austria, first of its kind, I guess, in Canada. There are similar systems around, but this is sort of a medium. The company that we partnered with, a long history of biomass and sorry, my internet connection looks like it's unstable. Sorry. PEI has had a lot of history in biomass. We've been heating buildings here for more than 20 years with biomass, and this company has been involved with heating numerous high schools, hospitals. So I think there has been, like I say, a tradition here on the island with biomass, and we've sort of grown up with that tradition. My father started burning straw in the 80s, and now me through the years. We do use oil as a backup, but this system does offset about 1 million liters of fossil fuels every year. So mostly we're burning what would be waste wood chips, whole trees that are harvested and would normally just be laying to waste in the field. But we also do burn some crop biomass from a local pressing plant. So waste seeds, basically, that would otherwise possibly go to the compost or the waste stream. Next slide, please. The greenhouse industry in general is an industry that's very based on natural gas. The greenhouse industry uses predominantly carbon or natural gas, And then as a waste product, the carbon dioxide is then pumped back into the greenhouse to supplement the plant growth. In our case, we don't have that natural gas option. So we're having to buy basically liquid carbon dioxide. So that's certainly a consideration in the cost of going biomass. We do have to invest in that biomass and then the CO2 to make our production make sense. But certainly the investment was, a lot of it was because there is a local supply, and as the previous speaker mentioned, it does stabilize the costs when you use biomass. Certainly fossil fuels can be very volatile, and being able to get a local supply of biomass that the cost is more stable certainly enables us to build our business in a sustainable way for the future. Some of the considerations with biomass on my scale. You do need a robust system because it is a system that needs to be maintained 24 hours. I can't have the system go down in a cold night in February. I've got to get out of bed and deal with it. So having a system that is robust and that can maintain all the different fuel quality. Fuel quality of biomass is certainly very important. If you're dealing with something that is not of the right consistency, moisture, it can be very difficult. And of course, biomass is much more capital intensive than any fossil fuels. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of maintenance. So it is definitely a consideration that you have to pencil out very carefully, I guess, as you think about those possibilities. Next slide, please. So a bit short and sweet. I'm not I'm not an expansive speaker, but that's a bit about our operation and I guess why we went biomass. It made sense for us. Our business wouldn't be sustainable without the ability to incorporate some of this type of technology. If we had to go to fossil fuels, well, the business just wouldn't be able to make sense.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Mark, so much for that. It's just nice to see you've got your whole family involved in the business. So that's great. And again, appreciate your commitment to the types of investments you've been making here for your business in terms of helping local production, but also doing it in a more sustainable way. So thank you for that. And again, I think it just illustrates the fact that there's business benefits to a lot of these investments. As both of our business speakers have said, there's cost savings, there's volatility in terms of fossil fuel prices. So there's different types of benefits that businesses can gain. So I will just remind you as I introduce our next speaker, this is our fourth and final panelist. So if you have questions for any of the speakers this morning, I encourage you to put those in the chat. But our next speaker and our final speaker for this morning is Lynn Adams. She's the Director of Energy and Environmental Policy at ACOA, and she's going to talk about the role of government in helping to facilitate clean tech adoption. So Lynn, over to you.
Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate the invitation to join the group today. For those of you who don't have experience with ACOA, we're the Government of Canada's federal economic development arm in Atlantic Canada. So we have business development and community development and policy and advocacy responsibilities in all 4 Atlantic provinces. So let's get right into it and switch to our next slide. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is how this transition to a green economy kind of came about. It's not brand new. We know that environmental responsibility in business has been around for a very long time, but quite frankly, it traditionally was a niche piece. It was a nice to do. It was supported by increasingly strong regulatory requirements from government. But this all changed just a matter of a few years ago, and it's related directly to climate change. Climate change began to be very real to people, began to hit them and in their lives. And so public awareness and concern around that issue has increased. That we began to see reflected both in people's voting choices, but quite frankly, in how they voted with their pocketbooks. So people were beginning to demand more environmental responsibility in the products that they purchased. And so what that began to do is switch the push for greening from a policy push from government to a pull from the market. So the marketplace began to exert this pressure on companies to decarbonize and to position themselves as such. And we're seeing this as well, not only within large companies, and it's very rare to find a large company these days who doesn't position itself as in terms of the changes it's making around decarbonization, but we're also seeing it in supply chain. And that's particularly important for a region like Atlantic Canada, which is dominated by small companies who are involved in some very important supply chains. We're also seeing this, quite frankly, I'm hearing this from a lot of companies. Investor demand for greener operations is increasing exponentially. Just very quickly, BlackRock, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, investment funds on the planet, has declared that it will no longer invest directly into operations that are carbon intensive. And in fact, they've also signaled their intention no longer to invest in companies which then in turn sell to carbon intensive operations. So the pressure is very significant, and therefore how it is that companies and industries improve their emissions and their energy use is really foundational to industrial positioning. And the reason that ACOA wanted to support EcoNext in doing this report with APEC was that this transition is hitting SMEs very quickly, and we want to support Atlantic companies in getting ready for it. Let's switch to the next slide, please. So in terms of the context for Atlantic Canada, we still have a very high reliance on fossil fuels in this region. Of course, part of that is the fact that 2 of our provinces still rely on coal for electricity generation, but there are other realities around it as well. We have a low population density, as we all know, and a smaller industrial scale that is dominated by traditional industries and by small and medium-sized companies. What this means is that we have established business practices and small companies. And that means that transition can be more difficult. It can take a little longer. And in 4 key areas that we feel these add extra challenges to our SMEs. The first is very practically understanding what does it mean to green a business. Secondly, adopting new technologies, support and understanding how to adopt new technologies can be challenging. Readying for the green supply chains. This is a really important one. This is where the rubber kind of hits the road for a lot of our companies, is when the larger firms that they sell to start demanding that they green their operations as a way to demonstrate a greening within the larger industry. And finally, developing new clean tech products and services, so the development of those capacities, those technologies, and getting them to the market can be challenging as well for small companies. Let's switch to the next slide. So in terms of how Government of Canada has responded to this, last year when the climate positioning was released by Government of Canada, a healthy environment and healthy economy, was the first time that this traditional tension in terms of it's either good for the economy or good for the environment, it can't be both, that was broken. And the positioning now is quite clearly what's good for the economy is good for the environment. And government followed this up with very significant programming dollars focused on decarbonizing our economy, targeted in terms of larger industries, but also direct support for important industries like those in Atlantic Canada, agriculture, forestry, et cetera. So it's around not just clean tech development anymore, but it's around the application of efficiency and clean technology across all industries to support the sustainability of our markets going forward. Part of Government of Canada's work on this has been supporting provincial efficiency organizations. I'm including this intentionally because I think these, in a lot of cases, are the unsung heroes of transformation. So they're in Nova Scotia, Efficiency Nova Scotia, there's Efficiency PEI, Save Energy New Brunswick, and Take Charge Newfoundland. These are critically important organizations for helping, especially small organizations, understand, so what does the adoption of clean technology mean? What can I do to reduce my energy use and my CO2 output? And also another important advancement has been the Clean Growth Hub. So I mentioned a large number of programs and large dollar amounts are made available. The responsibility for sifting through all of those don't lie with companies. You have enough to do in your day-to-day operations. The Clean Growth Hub was developed by the Government of Canada in order to be a one-stop window portal for you to get access to programming support. Let's switch to the next slide, please. So in terms of my own organization, ACOA has been around for more than 30 years, and we're well known for the programs that we deliver, which are all around, as you can see, expansion, growth, trade and export, development, skills and technical support, innovation, commercialization. But what we're doing now is we're doing that within a green lens. So doing all the things we were doing before around supporting companies in their growth, but doing it understanding sustainability, environmental sustainability has become a critical piece of economic growth going forward. So David suggested we use a couple of examples, which I thought was a great idea, of how it is that ACOA has done this. So two that we've chosen to use today. The first one is MISA, which is also known as Empowered Homes, a great Newfoundland-based company, which has developed and produces programmable thermostats. What they recognized was that there was a gap in the market for electric baseboard heating. So they developed this programmable thermostat, which organizations and homes and other buildings can use in order to get better control over the use of heating. As we know, we're in a cold climate, and so space heating is a huge use of energy in Atlantic Canada and in other jurisdictions. And so they developed this wonderful technology, easy to use, that is adaptable to smartphones. What that does is it gives you control over that energy use wherever you are. You can control that. Another example that we'll want to use today is Ocean Choice Fisheries. Really like this example because it's fish processing, which is critical to the economies in the 4 Atlantic provinces. It's something we've been doing for hundreds of years in our economies. But what's important here is that what Ocean Choice did was it continued with its business model, but it greened it. So it took what it was already going to be doing in terms of expanding its capacity, but it did so in a green way. So looked at its energy use, looked at its water use, looked at its processes, looked at where it is that it could identify efficiencies and build those into the expansion that it was already planning. So this is a really great example of how clean tech adoption is about practicality. It's about doing what you're already doing in a more green and more sustainable way, and therefore you can position your business as doing what it already was doing, but in a more responsible way. And the final point on this slide is simply that ACOA has been focused on lean technology, which means more efficient and more productive technology, technology of projects across the board. So we've been doing this for quite some time, have a lot of experience in it. Thanks, Erica. We can go back to the next slide, last slide. So in terms of, this is just to ease your ability to get in touch with us. Many of you know ACOA well. Please contact us. If you have an idea or an opportunity that you feel you could adopt clean technology in your business, please contact us. We have regional offices in each of the Atlantic provinces with satellite locations for ease of contact, but also the Clean Growth Hub. So if you're a larger organization or you're interested in some of these national programs, please contact the Clean Growth Hub. Contact information there, but simply type into your search engine either ACOA or Clean Growth Hub, and you'll get the contact information right away. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn, for kind of providing that information. We'll just leave that up for a few more seconds. The slides will be available afterwards, but if you want to take a screenshot or take that number down, you're welcome to do that if you want to get in touch with ACOA. So we do have some time for questions. Again, I just encourage you and invite you to put your questions in the chat. I'll just like to invite all 4 panelists if they just want to turn on the video, and we will just take some of those questions right now. Dion, I'd like to talk to you. You talk just at the very end about kind of your business and kind of building this into your business. You've talked about some very specific examples, but with a large business with so many different divisions and different opportunities in those various divisions for clean technology and sustainability, how do you build a culture throughout your organization where this is a priority, where people are looking for opportunities? Can you just speak about either specific examples you've done or how GDI as a business is trying to weave this into its whole kind of operations?
That's a good question, David. I'll talk more generally, and then I could probably just translate that into a specific example. But, I've been with the organization believe this is my 14th year. And when I first joined, and really since every year since, the focus has always been on continuous improvement and innovation. So that's in fact one of the core values of our organization. So in addition to health, safety, and the environment, which of course translates directly into the sustainability things we talked about this morning, um, this drive and this impression on employees when they first join and continuously while they're with the company is a focus on continuous improvement. So it's something that's really driven throughout the organization. I'm sure it existed long before I joined, and it certainly has been here for the last 15 years, 14 years while I've been here. So that's really how it cascades, I guess, throughout the organization. And that's really driven from, a manufacturing focus out, but it's really cascaded across all aspects of the organization. And, we see that in things like the addition of the biomass turbines, back pressure turbines, not large capacity, but it's just that additional little efficiency bump on what already exists in biomass motors. So it's just those types of things that people are looking for all the time.
Well, that's great. And Mark, I don't know if we turned off your video just because I know your internet got dropped for a moment there. But Mark, you've got a very different scale of business, but I know this is something that's very passionate to you. That kind of came across in your presentation, and it's something you've championed in your business. Where did your commitment kind of come from, and what motivates you to kind of keep pursuing this? Because you've talked about several different things you've done. Like, what's your driver for you as a business person in this area?
Ooh, thanks, David. Well, I think it is, a sustainable from a roundabout approach. Of course, we are an organic greenhouse, so it sort of goes with the whole environment of what we're trying to achieve. And there is the historic perspective that I mentioned. I mean, it's something that we've always been involved with. Harvesting local resources to make a business sustainable. It all makes sense together. So over time, when we sort of leveraged those learnings and assets that we had, they both made us sustainable from a business perspective, but also, from an environmental perspective at the same time. We're not selling any carbon credits or anything like that. Whether we should be, I guess I don't know. But I guess it's been sort of that's built on it over time. It's made sense. We're the sort of the farmers at the core. We do it ourselves, and not being dependent on imported fossil fuels made sense for us.
Okay, no, that's great. And I know one of the questions in the chat, we've had a couple of examples around biomass and biogas, and what about other technologies? I know Fred mentioned one of the speakers we'd hoped to have was Cabot Shores, that's invested in solar panels. So there's certainly, and that's kind of in the tourism sector. So there's certainly other examples, and some of those are highlighted in our various reports. Lynn, I'd like to come to you as a question. You've talked a bit about kind of the role and support of government here, but as you've worked with businesses and different clients, Fred shared some of his thoughts from the research. What is it that you're seeing on the ground in terms of, what does the broader business community kind of need to understand and learn from this? Because one of the questions is, are we late to the game? And Fred's already kind of shared some of those statistics that we're not maybe adopting at the same rate. So, what is it that you see that businesses here need to learn and understand to be successful in terms of clean tech adoption?
Sure, David, thank you. So I would suggest that companies start identifying practical ways that they can start adopting technology or practices which can save energy and other resources. And that really is what clean tech adoption is about at the practical scale. Clean tech adoption can sound very intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. So practically, I already mentioned the efficiency organizations within each province. I would absolutely start there. It's very common for us to refer a company over to them for an assessment to identify easy ways that they can start looking at improving their heat loss, improving their light usage, et cetera, which starts saving money right away and starts getting into that mindset that Dion talked about in terms of efficiency within your operations. From there, you get more used to the processes and can start looking at, again, depending on if you're a manufacturer or an exporter, come and talk to ACOA. About new technology maybe that you could be adopting and support that we can be providing for you in that. If you're a larger organization or are interested in some of these national programs, then talk to the Clean Growth Hub. Support is here and it's available for you.
Thank you, Elena, and Eric has put some of those links to our research and the Clean Growth Hub in the chat if you want to be able to click on those quite easily. Fred, I'd like to come back to you as a question. We've got a report that talks about a bit more the detail on the research, but also kind of policy recommendations in this area. If you could just pick, one or two things that governments could do to help support clean tech adoption, what would they be? And just to tie in one of the questions from the chat, is there any specific role here for municipalities in terms of helping them, or what they can do to help support firms adopting clean technology?
Yeah, that's a good question, David. Well, certainly more funding for clean tech accelerators like TechNL or VentureNL in Newfoundland and Labrador, Innova Corp or Volta in Nova Scotia, Propel or New Brunswick Innovation Foundation in New Brunswick. Those are all good ways to kind of provide funding for firms that are doing clean technology and allowing them to collaborate with large adopters. So forming industry partnerships or strategic alliances or joint ventures between these clean tech firms and potential large adopters to share information and knowledge and expertise, because we saw in our research that lack of information, lack of technical expertise is often an issue. So if organizations combine resources that can address some of those issues. And I think another important thing to do, David, is to de-risk some of the capital investment. So for smaller to medium-sized firms, that's part of the issue. We have a lot of small firms and medium-sized firms in the Atlantic region. Cost can sometimes be prohibitive, or the return on investment. So how do we get investments in scale up and commercialization or pilot testing of some of this clean tech at firms? And that's where government procurement can play a role in helping to kind of adopt some of this clean tech as well. In terms of municipal options, there's lots of things to do. Obviously, if government procurement's important, well, municipalities have a procurement budget as well. And so certainly they could be procuring more clean tech adoption. And I know Dion could speak about this better than I could, but I am aware that, there is some district heating at Irving Pulp and Paper and some potential there for further district heating. I know it was looked at a number of years ago, and the last I heard, they were actually looking at that again. But it's best for Dion to speak to that than me.
Well, Dion, we're kind of almost at time, but there's a couple of questions I'd just like to maybe combine and put towards you. You've talked a bit about some of the investments you've made on the energy side in the past, but the kind of questions coming up, what about the future? Where is JDI looking in terms of future kind of fuel use, future kind of fuel consumption? And then a question just around, international certification. Is this something in terms of, has JDI considered kind of international certifications for any of the changes and investments it make? Is that something that you see as valuable? If you want to just briefly address that, but I think the bigger question is around the fuel use.
So I'll address the fuel use first, David. I think I think there are still opportunities for sustainable use of biomass. There are opportunities where we can integrate some of that. I would say that the easier stuff has been done. How biomass actually gets used either in a gaseous form or whether it's through some form of pyrolysis for a liquid drop-in fuel. Those are all technologies we've been paying attention to for well over 10 years. They're not quite commercial yet, but I do believe they will get there, hopefully in the near future. So that's always an opportunity for sustainable biomass I see as an alternative to traditional fossil fuels. With respect to the standards, we've just released our 2020 sustainability report that does address, it's the first report that we've released that addressed Scope 1 through Scope 3 emissions. And, we did comply with internationally recognized reporting standards in that report. There are plenty out there right now. I don't think it's consolidated around one particular standard as the gold standard, but certainly SASB, GRI, PAS 2060, which is a British standard for net zero certification. If you read the report, you'll see in detail how we complied with each one of those reporting standards in our sustainability report. So I do agree international standards are important to comply for, particularly for trade. And I think the industry will ultimately coalesce, and we've certainly done our best to do that in our sustainability.
Well, thank you very much, Dion, for those answers. Thank you to Fred and Mark and Lynn for joining us today to share your insights. I very much appreciate that. I'd like to thank all our attendees again for taking the time this morning. I hope this has been helpful. There is an evaluation form. There's a link directly in the chat. If you could take a few minutes, we will also be sending that out via emails. We'd certainly appreciate taking 30 seconds just to give your perspective on that. Again, the recording will be available. The slides will be posted on our website if you want to go back and review those or share them with others that you think would be interested to watch this webinar. And then next year, kind of look forward to other research we have underway on Indigenous communities and businesses that will be coming out during the course of next year, and also some research we're doing on labor shortages and skills shortages, which I know is an issue impacting a lot of businesses. So we have work underway and we'll be showing that also in the course of the new year. So thank you very much again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you to Kieran at EcoNext for sponsoring this research, and we'll look forward to seeing you again at a future APEC event. Thank you very much indeed.